95 million years ago, the ocean already had monsters, Mosasaurus, giant sharks, marine reptiles large enough to swallow smaller predators whole. The hierarchy of the Cretaceous sea seemed obvious, but there is growing evidence that parts of that hierarchy may have been wrong because something else was hunting in those waters. Something with no bones, no shell, no skeleton at all. An animal so soft bodied that when it died, almost nothing remained behind, and yet it may have been one of the most dangerous predators in the entire ocean. Modern octopuses can solve puzzles, recognize individual humans, and coordinate 8 independent arms at the same time. Two-thirds of their neurons are not even located in the brain. Now imagine that body plan scaled to an animal longer than a city bus. At one fossil site, paleontologists found bones arranged in patterns that made no sense for normal ocean currents or scavenging. Something had been dragging bodies there repeatedly over long periods of time. Whatever was doing it left almost no trace of itself behind. No skull, no teeth, no spine, just fragments, marks, absences. If you're listening to this winding down for the night somewhere, I hope you enjoy this one. And if you'd like to see more stories like it, consider subscribing and leaving a like. Now, let's descend into the Cretaceous ocean and meet the giant predator scientists almost missed entirely. 95 million years ago, the center of North America was underwater, not beneath a cold abyss or a violent black sea, but beneath a broad inland ocean that moved slowly across the continent like warm breath. The western interior seaway stretched from the Arctic Circle down to the Gulf of Mexico, dividing the landmass into two long island continents separated by thousands of kilometers of shallow water. What is now Kansas, Alberta, and South Dakota rested beneath rolling currents lit by heavy sunlight and thick, humid skies. The water carried a different chemistry from the oceans of today. There were no polar ice caps locking water away at the ends of the planet, and sea levels stood roughly 200 meters higher than modern coastlines. Along the surface, temperatures in some regions reached 35 degrees Celsius, warm enough that the ocean felt almost body temperature near the shallows. Storms drifted across it in enormous spirals, feeding on heat that never truly disappeared. Beneath them moved an ecosystem built for abundance, where oxygen levels and nutrient circulation allowed living bodies to grow to dimensions that now seem almost implausible. Long reefs formed beneath the surface, though they were not coral reefs in the modern sense. Vast structures built by rudest bivalves rose from the seafloor like submerged stone cities, their shells stacked layer upon layer across millions of years. Fish moved through forests of drifting plankton. Ammonites spiraled through open water in numbers beyond counting. Everywhere there was movement, feeding, spawning, migration. The ocean carried the constant pressure of life consuming life. Among that movement were the predators that have come to define the late Cretaceous in the modern imagination. Mosasaurus huffmani moved through the seaway with the confidence of an animal that had never encountered resistance. 17 meters long, with a skull built for crushing bone, it patrolled the open water with sweeping lateral strokes of its tail. Its jaws closed with enough force to break through armor, cartilage, and shell alike. Even now, reconstructed skeletons of mosasaurs still look less like animals than siege weapons. Elsewhere, Cretoxyrhina mantelli crossed the sea at astonishing speed. Paleontologists later nicknamed it the Ginsu shark after the knives advertised on late-night television because fossils revealed bite marks cut cleanly through plesiosaur bone. At 7 meters long, its body was shaped almost perfectly for pursuit. Narrow and powerful, able to accelerate through open water with terrifying efficiency. Then there was Zephactinus audax, 6 meters of muscle and hunger suspended beneath the waves. Its hinged jaw opened impossibly wide, allowing it to swallow prey nearly half its own size whole. Some fossils preserve the final moments of those hunts. Smaller fish still lodged inside the predator's stomach cavity, frozen in stone before digestion ever finished. This was the hierarchy the ocean appeared to follow. Giant reptiles ruled the open water, sharks dominated through speed. Massive fish consumed anything smaller than themselves. The ecosystem felt understandable, almost orderly in its violence. And yet, in certain regions of this warm inland sea, something else occupied the top of the food chain, something none of these animals could see coming, something that had already been in this ocean for 200 million years before any of them arrived. Long before the first dinosaur placed a foot on land, before feathers, before grass, before the first flower opened anywhere on Earth, something soft bodied was already moving through ancient seas with 8 searching arms. Nearly 296 million years ago, during the Carboniferous period, the octopus lineage had already begun. Vast swamp forests covered the continents then. Dragonflies with wings wider than hawks crossed humid air, and amphibians ruled coastlines beneath an atmosphere richer in oxygen than the one humans breathe today. From that distant world comes a fossil called Posipia mazanensis, recovered from the Mazon Creek deposits of Illinois. Time compressed the animal into stone with improbable delicacy. Even after hundreds of millions of years, the outline remains recognizable almost immediately. 8 arms radiate outward from a compact central body. A mantle shape rests behind them. There is no external shell wrapped around the body the way ancient cephalopods once carried. It already resembles an octopus in the modern sense, not an experimental ancestor slowly becoming one. That familiarity is the unsettling part. A modern octopus hiding in a tide pool along the Pacific coast follows the same fundamental design. The proportions vary, species differ in size and behavior, yet the underlying architecture remains astonishingly stable across spans of time large enough to erase mountain ranges. Evolution transformed countless other lineages almost beyond recognition during those same ages. Entire branches of life appeared briefly, dominated oceans or continents, then vanished completely. The octopus body plan persisted with only subtle refinements, as though it had discovered something early that rarely needed correction. The lineage endured events that rewrote the biological structure of the planet itself. Around 252 million years ago came the Permian extinction, the most catastrophic mass extinction known in the history of animal life. Massive volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia released enormous quantities of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. Oceans warmed, acidified, and lost oxygen. Marine ecosystems collapsed so thoroughly that approximately 96% of marine species disappeared. Reef systems died, food chains unraveled. Entire evolutionary histories ended in geological silence. Somewhere within that devastation, the ancestors of modern octopuses survived. 201 million years ago, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction reshaped the world again. Volcanic activity fractured the supercontinent Pangaea and flooded the atmosphere with greenhouse gases. Ocean chemistry shifted once more. Large groups of reptiles, amphibians, and marine organisms vanished. The octopus lineage remained. Then came the extinction at the end of the Cretaceous period 66 million years ago, when an asteroid impact darkened the atmosphere and erased nearly all non-avian dinosaurs, along with marine reptiles, ammonites, and countless ocean species. Again, the lineage crossed the boundary intact. Five mass extinctions, one after another, the same essential body carried through each collapse. By the time the warm inland sea divided North America during the late Cretaceous, octopuses were not newcomers adapting to a fresh environment. They were already ancient animals, carrying nearly 200 million years of uninterrupted evolutionary refinement inside every movement of their arms and every pulse of their nervous system. What drifted through those waters had been shaped by catastrophes older than the continents surrounding the sea itself. And over that immense span of time, predation had been sharpening it continuously into something extraordinarily precise. Inside the body of an octopus, intelligence is not gathered into a single place. It drifts outward through the animal like current through water, dispersed across muscle, skin, and arm. A modern octopus contains roughly 500 million neurons, a number far beyond most invertebrates. A honeybee carries around 1 million. A mouse contains approximately 71 million. Even among vertebrates, the octopus occupies unusual territory, suspended somewhere between simplicity and startling complexity. Yet the number itself is not the strangest feature. Only about one-third of those neurons reside in the central brain. The remaining two-thirds extend outward into the arms, threaded through dense neural bundles that allow each limb to process information semi-independently. An arm can explore a crevice, manipulate an object, identify texture, and react to touch before the central brain fully interprets what is happening. Along the suckers are chemoreceptors capable of tasting the water and surfaces they contact, turning every reaching movement into a form of sensory investigation. This creates a nervous system unlike anything found in vertebrate life. A mammal directs its limbs from a centralized command structure. The octopus distributes decision making outward, allowing its arms to solve immediate physical problems on their own, while the central brain remains focused on timing, positioning, escape routes, and the larger geometry of the hunt. Watching one move across stone or reef feels less like observing an animal controlling its limbs and more like observing multiple minds cooperating silently inside the same body. The eyes evolved along a separate evolutionary path from those of fish, reptiles, birds, and mammals, yet arrived at a remarkably similar design. Lens, retina, iris, and pupil formed independently through convergent evolution, producing vision that rivals many vertebrates in clarity and depth perception. The pupil itself stretches horizontally across the eye and remains level with the horizon, even while the body rotates through the water. In a world where movement occurs in every direction at once, orientation never drifts. Beneath the skin lies another system operating almost as quickly as thought. Three specialized cell layers interact continuously with incoming sensory information. Chromatophores expand or contract to alter pigment. Iridophores manipulate reflected light into flashes of metallic blue, green, or silver. Leucophores scatter ambient light outward, matching surrounding brightness and texture. Together, they allow the body to alter appearance in less than 200 milliseconds, faster than a human blink. Color changes ripple outward across the mantle and arms, as though the animal were dissolving into the environment around it. At the center of those arms rests the only rigid structure in the entire body. The beak remains hidden until the final moment of contact, dark, curved, and sharp enough to penetrate shell, cartilage, or bone. It is made from chitin, the same structural material found in insect exoskeletons, though compacted here into something closer to a parrot's bill, embedded within living muscle. Venom flows through saliva, delivered at the instant the beak breaks tissue. Every known octopus species produces some form of it, a chemical mixture capable of disrupting neuromuscular function and beginning digestion simultaneously. Paralysis arrives quietly, spreading through the body of the prey while the predator maintains its grip. No shell protects the octopus, no spine supports it, no armor encloses it, and still, nearly every structure within its body has become either a weapon, a sensory instrument, or a mechanism of control. Nothing inside it remains ornamental. In 2012, researchers filming near the Pacific seabed recorded a giant Pacific octopus attached to the side of a dogfish shark, nearly twice its body length. The shark twisted violently through the water, bending against the pull with the smooth panic of an animal trying to outrun something it could not see clearly. The octopus remained fixed in place, three arms locked around the shark's gill region. Two more secured the tail. The remaining limbs adjusted constantly, tightening and repositioning with small muscular contractions that never appeared hurried. The shark eventually stopped moving. What stands out in the footage is not speed or aggression, but stillness. The octopus had not pursued the shark across open water. It had not chased, cornered, or exhausted it. The animal waited against rock until the shark drifted close enough to touch, then transformed the surrounding space into a trap that closed in less than a second. Modern octopuses hunt this way almost universally. They settle into the landscape and allow the environment to deliver prey directly into reach. Once contact happens, the mechanics become extraordinarily difficult to escape. Along each arm are rows of muscular suckers operating through independent hydrostatic pressure. A large octopus sucker can exert approximately 100 newtons of force. Spread across hundreds of suckers working simultaneously, the combined grip becomes less like holding and more like adhesion. Fish bodies flex, reptiles twist, fins strike water with enormous leverage. Yet every movement only creates new surfaces for additional suckers to attach themselves to. The arms do not grip randomly. Octopuses consistently target narrow biological choke points where control matters most. Gill slits, the back of the neck, and the tissue behind the eyes receive the highest concentration of contact during large prey attacks. Those locations provide thin barriers between venom delivery and the bloodstream. They also disrupt breathing almost immediately. In the Cretaceous oceans, this strategy may have scaled upward with terrifying efficiency. Ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs spent their lives in water, but still depended on atmospheric breathing. They needed rhythm, ascent, and regular access to the surface. A sufficiently large octopus would not have required the raw bite force necessary to tear through bone or armor. It only needed attachment. If the neck or respiratory region remained pinned long enough beneath the surface, drowning completed the process naturally. Another layer of defense surrounded the attack itself. Octopus ink is often imagined as a visual smokescreen, but its chemistry carries deeper effects. The cloud contains tyrosinase and related compounds capable of interfering with olfactory and chemoreceptor systems in nearby predators. In water, where scent and chemical gradients guide movement as much as sight, the effect resembles temporary sensory collapse. Direction becomes uncertain. Tracking signals disappear into the surrounding current. Large marine predators of the late Cretaceous relied heavily on chemical sensing and electroreception while hunting through murky or dim conditions. A sudden release of ink would not simply hide the octopus, it would disrupt the predator's ability to interpret the water itself. Even at modern scale, these tools already allow octopuses to overpower sharks, seals, and diving birds. Then the proportions begin to shift. Arm span lengthens outward across several meters. Suckers enlarge. Venom glands increase in volume. The grip closes with greater surface area and greater force, until the difference between prey and predator becomes strangely difficult to define. For the octopus, camouflage began as a way to approach food long before it became a way to avoid becoming food itself. The body does not merely hide, it alters its appearance with such precision that the distinction between animal and environment begins to dissolve. Along a reef, across sediment, or against broken stone, the octopus reshapes the visible surface of its body continuously, turning stillness into a predatory strategy more effective than speed. The transformation happens almost instantly. Specialized pigment sacs, called chromatophores, spread and contract beneath the skin through direct muscular control. Reds darken into browns, pale bands emerge, then vanish. A body suspended in blue water can become mottled stone coloration in less than 200 milliseconds, faster than a human blink completes itself. The nervous system coordinates these changes across the mantle and arms simultaneously, producing patterns that flow outward in shifting waves of color and brightness. Yet color alone does not explain the illusion. The skin itself changes texture through thousands of tiny muscular structures known as papillae. These flexible bumps rise and flatten independently, reshaping the surface into rough ridges, soft sand-like contours, or jagged protrusions resembling reef growth. An octopus resting beside broken limestone can mimic not only the shade of the surrounding stone, but its physical geometry. In dim water, where light scatters unevenly through suspended particles, texture matters as much as color. Researchers studying octopuses in natural habitats often describe the same strange experience. An animal is clearly visible one moment, observed directly through camera lenses or diving masks, then simply disappears while remaining physically present in the same location. The eye continues scanning the area without finding edges, movement, or contrast to isolate. The octopus has not hidden behind the environment. It has merged with the visual language of the environment itself. This is why octopuses rarely pursue prey across open distance. They settle against a surface and become part of the terrain through which other animals travel. The surrounding landscape turns into an extension of the predator's body. Fish drift past without recognizing danger. Crustaceans crawl within reach. Movement is delayed until the final fraction of a second, when the environment suddenly closes around the prey from multiple directions at once. In the warm coastal margins of the late Cretaceous, this ability may have operated with devastating efficiency. Marine reptiles, such as mosasaurs and ichthyosaurs, possessed large eyes adapted for detecting motion through open water. Their visual systems evolved around silhouettes, swimming patterns, and the contrast of moving bodies against light filtering from above. They had spent millions of years hunting predators that remained visible while approaching. They had no evolutionary preparation for a predator capable of becoming visually indistinguishable from the reef itself. Recent neuroscience studies added another layer to this strange biology. In 2019, and again in 2023, researchers filming sleeping octopuses documented rapid waves of changing skin patterns moving across resting bodies during what appears to resemble REM sleep. Colors shifted through sequences associated with hunting, concealment, and environmental matching while the animals remained motionless. Neural activity suggested internally generated visual processing, as though the sleeping octopus were replaying experiences across its skin. Somewhere in the shallow Cretaceous water, pressed flat against sunlit stone, an enormous body may have rested without outline or shadow, indistinguishable from the reef wall beneath it. Nearby, a 10-meter ichthyosaur passed close enough for the current from its movement to brush across waiting arms, and then the reef wall moved. Most ancient animals announce themselves to time through hard remains. Bone settles into sediment and slowly exchanges its original chemistry for minerals carried through groundwater. Teeth endure pressure, that destroys softer tissues. Shells survive buried beneath layers of mud and calcium-rich seafloor. Fossilization is not really preservation in the ordinary sense. It is replacement, a gradual exchange where the original body disappears molecule by molecule while stone takes its shape. The octopus rarely participates in that process. Nearly all of its body is water and protein, soft tissue designed for flexibility rather than endurance. When an octopus dies, the surrounding ocean usually reclaims it quickly. Scavengers arrive. Bacteria spread through the flesh. Currents separate tissue into fragments too delicate to survive burial. Within days or weeks, almost nothing recognizable remains. The animal dissolves back into the chemistry of the sea, with very little chance of leaving evidence behind. Only one structure consistently resists immediate decay. Hidden deep within the center of the arms sits the beak, compact and dark, made from hardened chitin. Yet even this creates problems for paleontology. The beak is small relative to the body and lacks the obvious anatomical signatures associated with bones or shells. Detached from surrounding tissue, it can resemble stray organic debris or fragments from unrelated marine organisms. Many likely passed unnoticed through museum collections long before researchers understood what they were looking at. The scale of the absence becomes startling when reduced to numbers. Across nearly 296 million years of octopus history, fewer than 20 confirmed body fossils exist anywhere in the geological record. Entire oceans came and went during that span. Continents shifted positions repeatedly. The lineage survived across virtually every marine environment on Earth, yet left behind only a scattering of confirmed impressions. Compare that silence to Tyrannosaurus rex. More than 50 partial or near complete T. rex specimens have been identified, despite the species existing for roughly 2.5 million years before extinction. An animal lineage more than 100 times older than T. rex produced barely a fraction of the fossil evidence. For decades, this absence shaped scientific assumptions almost invisibly. Paleontologists reconstruct ancient ecosystems primarily through preserved remains. Skeletons establish predator hierarchies. Teeth reveal feeding relationships. Shell accumulations map entire marine communities. If a major predator leaves almost no direct trace, the ecosystem appears incomplete without anyone realizing it. The octopus became a kind of evolutionary negative space, present biologically but absent from the visible record used to interpret prehistory. During the early years of the 21st century, a small number of researchers began shifting the question itself. Instead of asking where the octopus fossils were, they asked what a large cephalopod might leave behind besides its body. Intelligence alters environments. Predators shape patterns around them. Behavior can survive in stone long after flesh vanishes entirely. This changed paleontology from a search for anatomy into a search for signatures. Burrows reveal movement. Bite marks reveal feeding. Nesting sites reveal repetition across time. In some animals, accumulated debris around a resting place preserves habits more clearly than bones ever could. The absence of a body no longer meant the absence of the animal itself. Eventually, this way of thinking led researchers toward a fossil site in Nevada where the arrangement of ancient marine reptile bones no longer resembled geology alone. The answer emerging from the rock was not skeletal. It was spatial. Something had been organizing the dead. In the dry mountains of central Nevada, there is a fossil site where enormous marine reptiles lie buried beneath desert rock far from any modern shoreline. Wind moves across sagebrush and exposed stone there now, but during the Triassic period, the region rested beneath seawater. Since the 1950s, paleontologists working at Berlin Ichthyosaur State Park have excavated the remains of Shonosaurus popularis, one of the largest ichthyosaurs ever discovered. The animals reached lengths of around 14 meters, long-bodied marine reptiles shaped somewhat like gigantic dolphins, though separated from dolphins by entirely different evolutionary histories. At least 9 individuals were recovered from a surprisingly confined section of ancient seafloor, clustered within an area smaller than a basketball court. At first glance, the site appeared to resemble a mass death assemblage, perhaps the result of harmful algal blooms, sudden oxygen collapse, or disorientation during breeding behavior. Such explanations have precedent in paleontology. Entire schools of fish and groups of marine reptiles sometimes perish together under environmental stress. Yet the bones at Berlin Ichthyosaur State Park resisted those explanations in quiet ways that became more noticeable the longer researchers studied them. Natural death sites tend toward disorder. Currents scatter remains according to weight and shape. Skeletons collapse irregularly as connective tissue decays. Predators and scavengers drag parts away unpredictably. The Nevada bones did not behave that way. Certain skeletal elements appeared grouped together with strange consistency, almost as though they had been sorted before burial. Vertebral discs formed some of the clearest patterns. The flat circular bones from the spinal column appeared arranged in linear sequences, separated from skull material and limb structures. Similar bone types repeatedly clustered beside one another, while other skeletal elements remained absent or distant. Sedimentology offered no convincing mechanism for such precise sorting. Ocean currents do move bone, but they do not normally organize matching structures into repeated localized groupings with this degree of regularity. Another detail deepened the puzzle. Many bones lacked bite marks or fracture patterns associated with large vertebrate predators. There was little evidence that the ichthyosaurs had been consumed directly at the site by sharks or marine reptiles. Large skull elements and major limb bones were often missing altogether, while smaller or more transportable components remained. The arrangement carried the impression of selection rather than chaos, as though some parts had been carried elsewhere intentionally, while others accumulated in place. In 2011, paleontologist Mark McMenamin of Mount Holyoke College proposed an explanation unlike any previously attached to the site. He suggested the assemblage represented midden behavior from a giant cephalopod. A midden is a debris pile created by an animal outside its living space. Modern octopuses build them routinely. Around den entrances, they accumulate shells, crab carapaces, fish remains, and discarded prey fragments collected over long periods of occupation. Divers studying octopus dens often identify inhabited sites by the rings of debris arranged around the entrance long before they see the animal itself. McMenamin proposed that the Nevada fossil field preserved the same behavior at an immense scale. According to his interpretation, the ichthyosaurs were prey brought back repeatedly to a den positioned along the nearby rock face. The bones accumulated gradually outside the shelter over years, perhaps decades, while the animal occupying the den selected, manipulated, and discarded skeletal remains in recognizable patterns. The result is one of the strangest possibilities in paleontology. A graveyard assembled not by geology alone, but by behavior. Along the northern Pacific coastline today, Divers occasionally encounter giant Pacific octopuses emerging slowly from crevices in volcanic rock. Most are smaller than popular imagination suggests. Dense bodied animals with arm spans between 4 and 5 meters, large enough to cover a doorway when fully extended. Confirmed specimens can weigh over 70 kilograms, with thick muscular arms capable of bending steel crab traps and opening sealed containers from the inside. Yet scattered through historical records are accounts of much larger individuals. In the 1940s, a specimen recovered from Puget Sound was measured at approximately 9.1 meters across and weighed an estimated 272 kilograms. Some researchers later questioned portions of the measurement, largely because soft bodied animals are difficult to measure consistently after death. Even so, the record has never been conclusively disproven. The possibility remains suspended in scientific uncertainty, neither fully accepted nor discarded. Modern oceans already produce giant cephalopods under the right conditions. Deep-sea gigantism is a documented biological pattern observed across multiple lineages. In cold, high-pressure environments, species ranging from isopods to squid often grow dramatically larger than their shallow water relatives. Giant jellyfish pulse through abyssal darkness with bells wider than human bodies. Colossal squid develop eyes larger than dinner plates. The deep ocean stretches metabolism across longer timescales, and certain organisms respond by growing immense. The Cretaceous seas operated under almost inverted conditions. Instead of cold darkness, the western interior seaway carried warm temperatures, high oxygen availability, and extraordinary prey density. Marine ecosystems overflowed with ammonites, fish, crustaceans, and reptiles in quantities modern oceans rarely sustain. Faster metabolic activity, combined with abundant food, would have accelerated growth rather than limiting it. In such an environment, gigantism did not require the deep ocean. The shallow sea itself provided the necessary biological surplus. There is direct fossil evidence that giant cephalopods already existed there. Tussotuthis longa, a squid-like predator from the same seaway, left behind preserved gladius structures, the internal support rods found in certain cephalopods. From those remains, paleontologists estimate body lengths between 9 and 11 meters. The animal occupied the same waters and lived during the same broad period as the proposed Nevada predator. Gigantic, soft-bodied hunters were not theoretical within this ecosystem. They were already present. This gives scale to the Nevada midden in a way that becomes difficult to ignore. If the arrangement truly reflects den behavior by a cephalopod, then the animal responsible would have needed enough reach and strength to manipulate prey remains from creatures averaging 14 meters long. The spacing of the bone accumulations, combined with the likely dimensions of a den entrance capable of concealing such a predator, implies an octopus with an arm span at minimum around 9 meters. Some ecological reconstructions place the upper estimate beyond 12. No body fossil confirms this directly. No preserved mantle, sucker row, or articulated arm has ever emerged from the rock. The animal exists through inference, through the geometry of bones and the biological logic surrounding them. Its dimensions are reconstructed the same way astronomers infer invisible planets through gravitational effects on visible objects. Still, the scale settles into the imagination with unusual weight. 12 meters of arm span, wider than the length of a city bus, muscular limbs spreading outward through warm prehistoric water dense with life. A body soft enough to vanish from the fossil record almost completely, resting motionless against stone while enormous reptiles drifted unknowingly within reach. The ichthyosaurs, preserved in Nevada, represent only the largest shadows within a much broader feeding network. Across the late Cretaceous ocean, prey moved through nearly every depth and habitat imaginable, and the octopus lineage appears to have exploited much of it. Unlike predators built for one specific hunting strategy, octopuses adapted constantly to whatever food source provided the greatest return for the least energy spent. Their intelligence was tied directly to flexibility. Among the most abundant animals in the sea were ammonites, distant cephalopod relatives enclosed within spiraled shells that drifted through the water column in staggering numbers. Some species were small enough to fit inside a human hand. Others reached nearly 2 meters across. Trillions likely existed at any given moment throughout the global ocean, reproducing rapidly and forming a major foundation of the marine food web. Certain ammonite fossils preserve delicate circular holes drilled through the shell wall with remarkable precision. The openings are too clean and localized to match crushing predation from sharks or marine reptiles. Instead, they align closely with the feeding behavior of modern octopuses. The beak targets the shell's suture line, the structurally weakest region where internal chambers meet. Once penetration occurs, venom enters the soft body hidden inside, disabling the animal before extraction begins. The shell remains largely intact while the living occupant disappears. Around 100 million years ago, ammonite evolution began producing forms unlike the tightly coiled spirals that had dominated earlier seas. Heteromorph ammonites emerged in rapidly diversifying shapes: elongated corkscrews, hooked tubes, open coils, and bizarre looping geometries that appeared almost maladaptive from a hydrodynamic perspective. Some resembled paperclips drifting through the ocean. Others curved into irregular hairpin structures, unlike anything seen in earlier cephalopods. One proposed explanation for these strange forms centers not on movement, but on defense. A predator capable of manipulating prey from multiple directions simultaneously would make conventional shell geometry increasingly vulnerable. Arms could stabilize the shell, while the beak searched for weak points. An irregular structure might disrupt grip orientation or prevent efficient drilling. The ammonites may have been evolving not against teeth, but against touch. Large fish also occupied the octopus diet wherever opportunity allowed. Zephyctinus and related predators moved aggressively through open water, but even powerful fish become vulnerable near rocky margins, spawning grounds, or moments of reduced visibility. A concealed octopus, striking upward from below or outward from crevices, could convert the fish's own momentum into entanglement before escape reflexes fully activated. Young marine reptiles faced similar danger. Before mosasaurs reached their immense adult sizes, they spent years growing through coastal environments filled with ambush hazards. Juveniles hunted smaller prey in shallower water, exactly where large octopuses established dens and feeding territories. The earliest stages of a giant predator's life are often the most vulnerable, and the octopus appears to have occupied that vulnerable space efficiently. What mattered most was not loyalty to a single prey species, but adaptability across many. Modern octopuses already demonstrate this pattern. Crabs, mollusks, fish, seabirds, and carrion all become food when conditions shift. The Cretaceous giant likely behaved the same way, altering its diet according to migration cycles, population density, reproductive seasons, and local abundance. That flexibility changes an ecosystem more deeply than specialization ever could. A predator, feeding across multiple layers of the food web, shapes the behavior and population structure of many species simultaneously. Its influence spreads outward through the entire environment, touching nearly everything connected to it. Every known octopus species claims territory, from tiny tropical species no larger than a thumb to the immense giant Pacific octopus of northern waters. Each eventually selects a fixed location and returns to it again and again. The den becomes an anchor point within an environment otherwise shaped by tides, migration, and drifting current. An octopus may roam outward to hunt, but it rarely abandons the idea of home. That home serves several purposes at once. It is shelter during daylight hours, protection during molting, a chamber for mating, and a secure place to consume prey. In many species, the area surrounding the den gradually changes shape through repeated occupation. Empty shells gather near the entrance. Stones shift position. Fragments of prey accumulate in uneven piles. Over time, the surrounding terrain begins carrying the signature of a single resident animal. Modern octopuses display behaviors around these dens that verge on careful arrangement. Veined octopuses in the Indo-Pacific have been filmed carrying coconut shell halves across exposed seafloor, transporting them awkwardly beneath their bodies until they can be assembled into portable shelters. The shells provide no immediate benefit during transport. The usefulness exists in the future, requiring the animal to plan ahead before danger arrives. Giant Pacific octopuses alter their surroundings more subtly. Divers revisiting occupied dens often find shells sorted into clusters or debris moved aside from favored pathways. Some individuals leave broad, clear spaces outside the entrance, while others partially conceal the opening using collected fragments from the surrounding seabed. Certain reef-dwelling species decorate den entrances with coral pieces and shells arranged differently from one individual to another, producing structures that appear almost personal. Along the margins of the ancient western interior seaway, ideal den sites would have existed in abundance. Rudest reefs formed dense underwater structures filled with cracks, overhangs, and shadowed cavities. These reefs were built not by coral but by massive bivalves whose thick shells accumulated into stone like formations rising from the seafloor. Between the shallow coastal shelf and deeper water, the reef walls created protected recesses with open visibility into nearby hunting grounds. The Nevada fossil site once occupied such a coastline. What is now dry mountainside stood beneath shallow marine water during the late Triassic. The ichthyosaur bone assemblage rests against what would once have been part of a reef face, exactly the sort of terrain capable of concealing a large cephalopod den. Inside that recess, the water would have remained dim even during midday. Bone fragments may have lined the entrance where prey remains accumulated over years of feeding. Currents drifting through the opening carried traces of decomposing tissue outward into the sea. The surrounding stone retained warmth from the shallow water beyond, while the animal itself rested folded deep within the cavity, arms layered over one another in near complete stillness. As evening approached, the octopus likely emerged gradually into darker water, leaving the den to hunt across the reef margin before returning again before sunrise altered the light above. For years, perhaps longer, the same chamber remained occupied, the same entrance, the same growing accumulation of bones, the same hidden animal returning night after night through warm prehistoric water in an ocean that no longer exists. The most dangerous weapon this animal possessed is also the one least likely to survive into the fossil record. Teeth leave punctures, jaws crack bone, claws carve marks that remain visible for millions of years. Venom vanishes almost immediately. It disperses through blood, breaks apart chemically, and disappears long before sediment begins turning skeleton into stone. An animal could dominate an ecosystem through venom for entire geological ages and leave behind almost no direct evidence that the weapon existed at all. Every octopus species studied so far produces venom in some form. The trait appears deeply ancient within the lineage, present not only in specialized modern species, but woven throughout the group itself. Even small reef octopuses, hidden beneath stones, carry biochemical systems designed for immobilization and tissue breakdown. Venom was not a late evolutionary addition. It seems to have accompanied the octopus body plan almost from the beginning. The chemistry varies between species, but certain components appear repeatedly. Cephalotoxins, unique to cephalopods, interfere with neural signaling and muscular coordination. Proteolytic enzymes begin dissolving tissue almost immediately after contact, softening prey internally before feeding even begins. In some species, the venom also contains tetrodotoxin, among the most potent, naturally occurring neurotoxins known on Earth. The blue-ringed octopus demonstrates the scale of that potency with unsettling efficiency. Small enough to fit within a human palm, it carries enough tetrodotoxin to kill roughly 26 adult humans within minutes under ideal conditions. The animal does not manufacture the toxin directly. Instead, symbiotic bacteria living inside its salivary glands produce the compound continuously, turning the octopus into a living delivery system for chemistry generated by another organism entirely. Scaling this biology upward changes the implications dramatically. Across living octopus species, venom gland size generally increases with body size. A giant cephalopod with arms stretching 9 meters or more would possess venom glands vastly larger than those of modern shallow water species, capable of delivering proportionally greater fluid volumes into prey tissue. Whether the potency itself increased remains impossible to measure, but the total delivered dose almost certainly would have. Delivery required only brief contact from the beak. Soft tissue near the gills, along the throat, or behind the skull allowed venom rapid access to the bloodstream. Once circulation carried the compounds through the body, neuromuscular control began degrading within seconds to minutes, depending on prey mass and injection depth. Large marine reptiles relied on coordinated respiratory movement to surface and breathe. Disruption of that rhythm alone could become fatal underwater. For an ichthyosaur entangled beneath the surface, paralysis did not need to arrive instantly. Respiratory muscles weakening gradually would already prevent efficient ascent. Swimming coordination would fail next. The body would begin sinking while the octopus maintained attachment, conserving energy as the prey exhausted itself against the surrounding water. None of this process leaves identifiable marks behind. Venom creates no characteristic fracture pattern. It leaves no preserved residue surviving fossilization across tens of millions of years. Even a perfectly articulated skeleton offers no indication that neurotoxins once moved through its blood. And so the most lethal part of the animal became almost completely invisible to geology. The evidence survives only because modern descendants still carry the same biochemical inheritance within their saliva. Whatever the giant octopus hunted in those vanished seas, it hunted without leaving forensic scars behind. For decades, the dominant explanation for intelligence in biology centered on social life. Large brains were thought to emerge mainly in animals, forced to navigate relationships within groups, alliances, rivalries, hierarchies, and long-term cooperation. Primates remembered status and kinship. Dolphins coordinated movement across pods. Corvids tracked social bonds across entire flocks. Intelligence appeared tied to the pressure of constantly interpreting other individuals. The octopus evolved almost entirely outside that framework. Most species spend their lives alone. They establish dens, hunt independently, and interact with one another only briefly during mating. There are no family groups, no shared territories, no cooperative hunting structures that persist across generations. And yet, inside this solitary animal exists the most complex nervous system ever documented in an invertebrate. That contradiction forced biologists to reconsider older assumptions about how intelligence develops. Social complexity clearly was not the only pathway capable of producing flexible cognition. Somewhere within the evolutionary history of the octopus lineage, another pressure had selected for memory, adaptability, and problem solving over immense spans of time. In laboratory environments, octopuses repeatedly demonstrated abilities that exceeded what researchers initially expected from an animal without a backbone. Individuals learned maze layouts and remembered the solutions days later. When the pathways changed, many adapted quickly rather than repeating memorized motions blindly, suggesting the animals were forming internal spatial models instead of simple conditioned routines. Aquarium researchers also documented individual human recognition. Some octopuses reacted differently towards specific caretakers based on previous interactions, approaching familiar individuals while withdrawing from strangers. The distinction persisted even when clothing and feeding schedules varied, implying recognition beyond basic visual association. Observational learning added another layer. In controlled studies, octopuses that watched another individual solve a feeding puzzle later completed the same task faster themselves, despite never handling the apparatus beforehand. Information had been acquired indirectly through observation alone. Tool use complicated the picture further. Veined octopuses carrying coconut shell halves across exposed seafloor were transporting objects with no immediate benefit. The usefulness existed later, after the shells could be assembled into shelter. The behavior required anticipation of future need and temporary inconvenience in the present. Researchers studying octopus behavior across multiple institutions also identified consistent personality traits within individuals. Some remained persistently bold, exploring unfamiliar spaces immediately. Others approached slowly and cautiously, even after repeated exposure. Curiosity, aggression, and tolerance toward disturbance remained stable across different days and environments. In animal behavior science, personality refers to repeatable behavioral tendencies across time. Octopuses meet that definition clearly. Then sleep research deepened the mystery further. In 2023, scientists monitoring octopus skin activity during sleep documented repeating waves of coordinated chromatophore changes occurring at intervals comparable to REM cycles in vertebrates. The animals remained motionless while patterns surged rapidly across the body surface. Researchers proposed these phases may involve memory consolidation, similar to processes observed in mammals and birds. All of this emerges from a nervous system unlike any vertebrate design. Distributed control, semi-autonomous arms, and decentralized processing should not, according to older expectations, produce this level of behavioral flexibility. Yet, they do. 95 million years ago, beneath warm inland seas and along hidden reef margins, this same cognitive architecture already existed. moving silently through an ancient ocean long before human beings possessed the language to recognize intelligence in a form so profoundly different from their own. Predators and prey reshape one another over immense stretches of time. In the fossil record, these evolutionary contests often leave traces on both sides. Crushing jaws become thicker and more specialized. Defensive shells become denser, sharper, or more tightly sealed. Saber-toothed predators evolved alongside prey, capable of faster escape. Trilobites developed reinforced armor, while ancient arthropods evolved stronger crushing appendages. The evidence usually arrives as a paired transformation, attack and defense changing together across generations. But a soft-bodied predator creates a different problem for paleontology. An octopus leaves almost nothing of itself behind. No teeth accumulate through sediment layers. No claws preserve distinctive marks. Its influence survives mainly through the bodies of the animals forced to adapt against it. The predator disappears, while the prey carries the memory forward in altered anatomy. During most of ammonite history, shell design remained remarkably efficient and consistent. Standard ammonites carried tightly coiled shells arranged in smooth logarithmic spirals, compact structures that balanced buoyancy and hydrodynamics with extraordinary effectiveness. They drifted and swam through ancient oceans in forms refined across hundreds of millions of years. The geometry worked so well that evolution preserved it again and again. Then, during the late Cretaceous, the patterns began changing rapidly. Around 100 million years ago, heteromorph ammonites started diversifying into forms that appeared strangely impractical. Some shells partially unwound into loose spirals. Others curved into hooks or stretched outward into long, irregular shafts. Certain species resembled twisted paperclips suspended in water. Nodules and protrusions appeared along shell surfaces that would have increased drag and reduced swimming efficiency. One of the most striking examples was Diplomoceras maximum. Reaching lengths of roughly 1.5 meters, its shell curved into a broad hairpin shape, unlike almost anything else in marine evolution. From a purely hydrodynamic perspective, the structure made little sense. It sacrificed streamlining without obvious compensating advantages in speed or buoyancy. Yet the forms persisted and diversified. One possible explanation emerges when viewed through the mechanics of octopus predation. A tightly coiled shell presents predictable geometry. A flexible predator with multiple arms can grip it from several directions simultaneously, orient the opening toward the beak, and drill through weak structural points along the suture lines. Irregular shells complicate that process. Hooks, unwound chambers, and asymmetrical curves make the body harder to stabilize and more difficult to rotate into feeding position. Even slight delays matter during predation. A prey animal that forces a predator to spend additional seconds manipulating shell orientation gains additional chances for escape. Over millions of years, those small advantages accumulate across entire populations. Some paleontologists describe this kind of unseen influence as an ecological ghost, a predator so effective that its presence becomes visible only through the evolutionary distortions it creates in surrounding species. The predator itself vanishes from the record while the prey carries evidence of the pressure within its changing body shapes. If that interpretation is correct, then the bizarre ammonite diversity of the late Cretaceous may not represent evolutionary experimentation for its own sake. Those strange corkscrew shells and unwound spirals may instead record the long shadow of an intelligent cephalopod predator moving silently through warm inland seas, shaping entire lineages without leaving behind a fossilized body of its own. For more than a century, Museums displayed those ammonite forms as paleontological curiosities. The possibility remains that they were never curiosities at all, but evidence pointing quietly toward the animal that hunted them. The largest living octopus on Earth rarely survives beyond 5 years. A giant Pacific octopus can reach enormous size within that brief span, developing extraordinary coordination, problem solving ability, and behavioral flexibility before its life ends almost as suddenly as it began. After reproduction, the decline is irreversible. The body begins shutting itself down through mechanisms encoded deep within its biology long before the animal was born. A female may lay close to 100,000 eggs beneath the shelter of her den. From that moment forward, her entire existence narrows into the task of keeping them alive. She cleans each egg continuously with the tips of her arms, removing fungal growth and drifting debris. She circulates fresh, oxygenated water across the clustered strands, hour after hour, without interruption. During this period, which can last 6 to 7 months in cold water species, she does not leave to hunt. Gradually, her body deteriorates, muscle mass weakens, skin loses texture, and color control becomes erratic. Researchers observing brooding females often describe them as fading physically while maintaining unwavering attention toward the eggs themselves. When the hatchlings finally emerge into open water, the mother dies shortly afterward. The male follows a different but equally final path. Within weeks of mating, hormonal changes initiate widespread cellular collapse throughout the body. Appetite disappears. Tissue begins degenerating. The process cannot be reversed, even under laboratory care, with abundant food and protection from predators. This reproductive strategy is called semelparity, a single reproductive event followed by programmed death. Among small, fast-breeding organisms, it is relatively common, but in large, intelligent animals, it becomes deeply unusual. The octopus invests everything into one generation and then vanishes entirely. The contradiction inside that life history remains difficult to reconcile. An animal possessing roughly 500 million neurons, capable of memory, tool use, and adaptive learning, exists for only a fraction of the lifespan reached by many birds or mammals with comparable behavioral complexity. A crow may live 20 years while learning from parents and flock members across seasons. Chimpanzees can spend decades transmitting behaviors socially through groups that persist over generations. Octopuses inherit none of that continuity. No parent survives long enough to teach offspring how to hunt, camouflage, or build a den. Every individual begins alone. And yet, each generation rediscovers the same solutions independently. Young octopuses, emerging from eggs, already possess the neurological flexibility required to navigate an unpredictable environment immediately. Instinct provides the foundation, but experience rapidly reshapes behavior within months. The intelligence develops fast because it has to. There is no extended childhood in which mistakes can accumulate safely over years. For the giant Cretaceous animal, the implications become staggering. If it followed a similar semelparous cycle, then an apex predator with arms spanning perhaps 9 meters or more reached that size in roughly 3 to 5 years. The growth rate required immense daily energy intake from the earliest stages of life onward. Hunting large prey would not have been an occasional achievement reserved for maturity. It would have become biologically necessary almost immediately. The most effective predator in that vanished ocean may have possessed only a handful of years to exist fully. A few years to perfect camouflage, establish a den, shape the surrounding ecosystem, and fill the seafloor outside its shelter with bones. Then it disappeared completely. Its offspring entered the same water, carrying none of its memories, learning the ancient patterns again from the beginning. The giant octopus of the western interior seaway did not inhabit that ocean alone. Around it moved other cephalopods of extraordinary scale, some belonging to lineages that left clearer physical traces behind in the stone. The late Cretaceous sea was not merely populated by large cephalopods, occasionally reaching unusual size. It appears to have supported an entire community of them, multiple gigantic species occupying overlapping ecological roles at the same time. One of the clearest examples is Tuzoteothus longa, a squid-like cephalopod confirmed from deposits within the western interior seaway itself. Unlike octopuses, squid possess an internal support structure called a gladius, a long semi-rigid remnant of the ancestral shell buried inside the mantle. Though soft tissue still vanished quickly after death, the gladius fossilized more readily than octopus anatomy, leaving enough material for paleontologists to estimate size. Some preserved specimens imply total body lengths between 9 and 11 meters. These were not speculative dimensions inferred from behavior or prey remains. They were animals directly confirmed from fossil evidence, drifting and hunting through the same inland waters where the Nevada assemblage formed. One Tusoteuthis fossil preserved another detail unexpectedly. Inside the mantle cavity, researchers identified remains of Hesperornis, a large, flightless diving bird adapted for underwater pursuit. The discovery established the squid as a predator capable of capturing substantial vertebrate prey. Yet the fossil also revealed vulnerability. The bird itself appears to have been partially consumed before the squid died, suggesting an ecosystem where even giant cephalopods moved constantly between predator and prey, depending on circumstance. Far from North America, Japanese deposits later revealed another giant species, Habroteuthis poseidon. Though less completely understood, the fossils confirmed that enormous cephalopods were not isolated regional anomalies. Similar lineages appeared across distant oceans, separated by thousands of kilometers, implying global environmental conditions favorable to cephalopod gigantism during the Cretaceous. Together, these discoveries reshape the image of the ancient sea entirely. Rather than a simple hierarchy dominated solely by marine reptiles and sharks, the ocean contained a diverse predator guild where multiple soft-bodied hunters occupied top trophic levels simultaneously. Giant squid-like forms, large octopus lineages, predatory fish, and marine reptiles all competed within the same warm water ecosystems. That competition would have been relentless. Cephalopods hunted one another as readily as they hunted fish or reptiles. Fast-moving squid likely occupied more open water zones, while ambush-oriented octopus lineages controlled reefs, rocky margins, and den territories along the seafloor. Marine reptiles crossed through both environments, creating overlapping layers of predation pressure throughout the ecosystem. Yet even this picture remains incomplete because of what paleontologists sometimes call the ghost squid problem. Squid fossilize slightly better than octopuses because the gladius occasionally survives burial. Even so, the confirmed specimens likely represent only a tiny fraction of the true diversity that once existed. Entire lineages may have disappeared without leaving a single identifiable fossil behind. The Cretaceous ocean therefore contained far more biological complexity than older reconstructions suggested. Animals without bones or external shells had expanded into ecological roles normally associated with giant vertebrates, shaping food webs on a scale almost invisible to geology. 95 million years ago, the top of the marine food chain did not belong to one type of creature alone. Several unrelated cephalopod lineages had reached enormous size simultaneously, sharing the same warm water beneath the drifting continents. Then the asteroid arrived, long before the mountains of the Yucatan Peninsula rose above sea level, before human language, before mammals inherited the surface of the Earth. A fragment of the early solar system crossed the orbit of this planet at a speed almost too fast for biology to comprehend. Fossil pollen preserved in boundary sediments suggests the northern hemisphere was in late spring when it arrived, approximately 66 million and 43,000 years ago. The asteroid measured somewhere between 10 and 15 kilometers across. Dense with nickel and rock, it entered the atmosphere traveling nearly 20 kilometers per second. The descent from the edge of space to impact lasted less than 2 seconds. Then it struck the shallow carbonate platform of what is now the Yucatan Peninsula with an energy release greater than billions of nuclear weapons combined. Near the impact zone, the ocean disappeared instantly beneath expanding plasma, hotter than the surface of the Sunday. A cavity, nearly 100 kilometers wide, opened through water and crust together. Molten rock rose upward in a luminous column visible across half the planet before collapsing back toward Earth. Within hours, a firestorm spread outward across the hemisphere. Tiny droplets of vaporized rock blasted into the upper atmosphere, cooled into glass spheres, then fell back through the sky in such numbers that the air itself began radiating heat. Forests ignited continent after continent. Animals far beyond the immediate blast zone died without ever seeing the impact. The ocean carried the violence farther still. Tsunamis generated by the collision moved through the Gulf of Mexico and outward into the Atlantic basin, leaving disturbed sediment layers that remain visible in the geological record today. Near the impact site, some waves may have reached heights measured in hundreds of meters. Entire coastlines vanished beneath moving walls of seawater and debris. Yet the deepest wound came afterward, in silence rather than impact. The asteroid struck sulfate-rich rock buried beneath the ancient seabed, injecting approximately 100 billion tons of sulfur into the stratosphere. There, the material spread into a global aerosol veil that reflected sunlight back into space. Temperatures fell rapidly. Within months, average surface conditions may have cooled by 10 to 20 degrees Celsius. Light faded from the oceans first. Phytoplankton, the microscopic drifting organisms supporting nearly every marine food web, began dying in enormous quantities as photosynthesis collapsed. The effect moved upward through the ecosystem, layer by layer. Small animals disappeared, then the larger predators dependent on them. The great marine reptiles that had ruled the Cretaceous Sea for millions of years entered a world where prey no longer existed in sufficient numbers to sustain them. At the boundary now called the KPG extinction, approximately 75% of all species on Earth vanished. Every mosasaur died. Every plesiosaur died. Every giant ammonite lineage disappeared completely after more than 340 million years of uninterrupted existence. Not a single species crossed into the world that followed. The warm inland seas withdrew. The reefs collapsed. The great predator guilds dissolved into absence. For a geological moment, the oceans became quiet. And through all of it, the octopuses crossed the boundary alive. Every giant hunter in that ancient sea vanished forever. The one that looked like the rock it rested on didn't. After the asteroid winter settled across the oceans, survival no longer belonged to the fastest hunters or the largest bodies. The rules changed almost overnight. Warm coastal systems cooled. Oxygen levels dropped. food webs fractured into drifting fragments. Entire evolutionary dynasties that had persisted for tens of millions of years vanished in what, geologically, was almost an instant. And yet, the octopus lineage crossed the boundary intact, carrying its ancient body plan quietly into the Paleogene world. Part of the answer was hidden inside its circulatory system long before the impact occurred. An octopus possesses three hearts. Two branchial hearts push blood through the gills, while a separate systemic heart drives oxygenated blood through the rest of the body. In stable oceans rich with oxygen, this arrangement is metabolically expensive. But in stressed environments where oxygen fluctuates unpredictably, redundancy becomes resilience. If circulation efficiency declines in one part of the system, the animal does not fail immediately. The architecture absorbs instability the way deep water absorbs surface storms. Its blood itself carried another advantage. Vertebrates rely on iron-based hemoglobin, which performs exceptionally well in warm, oxygen-rich environments. Octopuses use hemocyanin instead, a copper-based molecule that turns the blood blue when oxygenated. In tropical seas of the Cretaceous, hemocyanin was less efficient than hemoglobin. But as sunlight faded after the impact and ocean temperatures dropped, the chemistry reversed. Hemocyanin binds oxygen far more effectively in cold, low oxygen conditions. The post-impact ocean became hostile to many marine reptiles precisely because their physiology had evolved for stability. The octopus already carried a system adapted for instability. Even its skin participated in survival. Octopuses absorb oxygen directly across the surface of the body, supplementing the work performed by the gills. The exchange is modest under ordinary conditions, but in depleted water, every additional pathway matters. Across millions of struggling animals, slight physiological advantages become the dividing line between continuity and extinction. Food scarcity favored it as well. Modern octopuses consume an enormous range of prey, including crustaceans, mollusks, fish, seabirds, small sharks, and carrion. They are opportunists in the purest ecological sense. After the impact, coastlines and shallow seas filled with dying organisms, drifting carcasses, and weakened survivors. Specialist predators dependent on narrow food chains collapsed quickly. The octopus required no single prey species to persist. Almost anything edible could become energy. Even the ink cloud, evolved originally for hunting and escape, may have gained new utility in poisoned waters dense with chemical signals from decomposition. Large marine predators that remained alive depended heavily on chemoreception to navigate the darkened ocean. A body capable of masking its own sensory signature gained moments of invisibility inside an ecosystem saturated with death. Its short lifespan became another unexpected advantage. With generations measured in years rather than decades, evolutionary adaptation accelerated dramatically. Natural selection could reshape populations within spans of time, too brief for large vertebrates to respond effectively. While giant marine reptiles reproduced slowly, octopus lineages cycled rapidly through mutation and selection. None of these traits evolved because of the asteroid. They already existed, accumulated gradually across 200 million years of predatory life in ancient seas. The hearts, the blood chemistry, the flexible diet, the accelerated generations, all of it emerged through ordinary survival pressures long before catastrophe arrived. It did not survive because it was indestructible. It survived because everything ocean hunting had built into it happened to resemble an apocalypse survival kit. For a long time after the impact, the oceans of Earth did not resemble the oceans that came before them, or the oceans alive today. The familiar architecture of marine life had collapsed so thoroughly that paleontologists refer to the earliest phase after the extinction simply as the survival interval, a span of roughly 10,000 years, marked not by recovery, but by persistence. The water carried the chemistry of catastrophe everywhere. Across sediments laid down at the boundary between the Cretaceous and Paleogene periods, carbon isotope ratios shift abruptly, preserving the planetary signature of decomposition on an almost unimaginable scale. Entire ecosystems were breaking apart simultaneously. Dead plankton sank through the water column in endless organic snowfall. Coastal margins accumulated rotting biomass faster than scavengers could consume it. Oxygen vanished from some seafloor environments entirely, leaving dark, stagnant zones where only specialized organisms endured. The oceans were not silent after the extinction, they were crowded with absence. The great marine reptiles had disappeared completely. No mosasaur cruised the continental shelves anymore. No plesiosaur rose from deeper water beneath schools of fish. Cretoxorina, the powerful shark that once sliced through bone, vanished from the fossil record. Xiphactinus disappeared with it. Entire predator guilds dissolved almost simultaneously, leaving behind ecological spaces that remained open for thousands of years. What survived was smaller, faster breeding, and less specialized. Small fish persisted in scattered populations. Early shark lineages crossed the boundary in reduced numbers. Some marine invertebrates endured in refuges where food chains remained barely functional. A handful of seabird groups survived along unstable coastlines, and the cephalopods remained. Not all of them, certainly. The ammonites, despite surviving previous extinction events for more than 300 million years, vanished entirely. Their coiled shells disappeared from the oceans forever. But the soft-bodied cephalopods endured, especially the lineages already adapted for flexibility, concealment, and opportunistic feeding. For the octopus, the Paleogene world removed pressures that had shaped marine life for millions of years. The large vertebrate predators that once dominated shallow coastal ecosystems were gone. Competition for prey diminished sharply. Reef systems, though devastated, gradually reassembled into simpler forms that small predators could exploit. In the fractured ecosystems that followed the extinction, adaptability became more valuable than size. This was the world in which modern octopus diversity likely began expanding outward. Over millions of years, lineages diverged into new ecological roles. Some specialized for abyssal darkness, thousands of meters below the surface. Others adapted to tropical reefs, dense with coral growth and narrow crevices. Cold water species spread through polar environments where few competitors could function efficiently. Today, more than 300 known octopus species occupy nearly every marine habitat on Earth, from tidal pools to hydrothermal vent systems. The giant forms of the Cretaceous did not return. The shallow inland seas that once stretched across continents disappeared with the changing climate of the later Paleogene. Oxygen levels shifted, reef structures changed. The immense prey biomass, capable of sustaining 9-meter predators, faded with the old world that produced it. But the deeper design survived intact. The distributed nervous system remained, the camouflage remained, the venom, the den behavior, the intelligence, all of it crossed the boundary together. The dinosaurs received a mass extinction named after their disappearance. The octopus inherited an empty ocean and slowly filled it. Along coastlines, scattered across the modern world, octopuses continue performing behaviors that seem to belong to a much older ocean. Beneath piers, inside volcanic reef systems, or within narrow fractures cut into cold stone, they arrange debris outside their dens in patterns so consistent that marine biologists now recognize them immediately. Shell fragments pile beside entrances, crab remains accumulate in deliberate clusters, fish bones gather near the same occupied recesses for months at a time. This behavior, known as midden building, has been documented independently in dozens of octopus species separated by entire oceans and millions of years of evolutionary divergence. Tropical species do it. Deep water species do it. Cold water species do it. The repeated appearance across unrelated lineages suggests something ancient rather than recently learned, a behavioral inheritance preserved deep within the group itself. In Jervis Bay, Australia, researchers studying gloomy octopuses uncovered something even more unexpected. The sites became known as Octopolis and later Octlantis, dense seafloor communities where multiple octopuses established neighboring dens within the same small territory. Until recently, this degree of proximity was thought impossible for an animal considered fundamentally solitary. The settlements were not random. Scallop shells surrounded den entrances in arranged rings and layered accumulations maintained across multiple generations of occupation. Individuals competed, interacted, displaced one another, and repeatedly returned to preferred locations. Underwater cameras captured disputes over territory, object manipulation, and behaviors, suggesting a level of environmental awareness more flexible than simple instinctive programming. The scenes carried an eerie resemblance to the Nevada fossil assemblage: different prey, different ocean, different geological era, yet the same underlying logic appeared to shape both environments. A hidden animal occupied a permanent den and accumulated remains outside it over long stretches of time. Elsewhere in the Indo-Pacific, veined octopuses continued transporting coconut shell halves across open seafloor to assemble temporary shelters. The action appears almost casual until its implications become clear. The octopus selects an object before it becomes useful, carries it despite the energetic cost, then preserves it for a future situation not yet encountered. That sequence requires anticipation. The animal is representing a future need before the need arrives. Laboratory studies reveal similar flexibility. Modern octopuses solve unfamiliar puzzles involving jars, locks, mazes, and mechanical barriers, with no equivalent in their evolutionary history. Some individuals learn by watching another octopus complete the same task first. Others adapt rapidly when a previously successful strategy stops working. This kind of generalized problem solving reaches beyond fixed instinct. It resembles reasoning, not in the human sense, but as a flexible ability to model problems and alter behavior dynamically, which means the Cretaceous giant almost certainly possessed the same neurological foundation, possibly more than the same. Larger cephalopod body size correlates with increased neural complexity and expanded sensory processing. A giant octopus living in the inland seas of the late Cretaceous would not have been behaviorally primitive compared with its descendants. It may have expressed the same capabilities on an even larger ecological scale. Every octopus alive tonight still carries those inheritances silently through the water. The middens remain, the den building remains, the hidden observation from within cracks of stone remains. The hardware became smaller. The program underneath it stayed almost unchanged for 95 million years. In paleontology, most discoveries arrive slowly. A fragment of jaw appears in one decade. a vertebra in another. Then years of cautious comparison follow before anyone claims to understand what they are looking at. The Nevada ichthyosaur site resisted that process. The bones had been known since the 1950s, studied repeatedly, mapped carefully, and described in technical literature for decades. Yet the arrangement continued to sit inside the field like an unresolved sentence. Mark McMenamin approached it from an unusual direction. He was a paleontologist at Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts, known primarily for work on Precambrian life and the earliest evolution of animals. Cephalopods were not his original specialty, which mattered more than it first appeared. Researchers, deeply embedded within a discipline, often inherit the assumptions of that discipline so completely they become invisible. McMenamin arrived at the Nevada site carrying fewer of those assumptions. In 2011, he presented his interpretation to the Geological Society of America under a title startling enough to attract immediate attention: Cambrian Predator from the Triassic? Even the wording revealed how far outside conventional explanations the hypothesis reached. He proposed that the clustered Shawnosaurus bones represented the midden of a giant cephalopod, most likely an octopus-like predator living in a nearby den. Scientific reaction arrived quickly and cautiously. Popular science media covered the claim widely because it carried the shape of myth while remaining grounded in actual fossil evidence. Within the paleontological community, skepticism dominated the response. Several researchers published alternative explanations, attempting to account for the bone arrangement through known geological processes rather than behavior. One proposal involved hydraulic sorting. Ocean currents naturally separate bones by size, density, and shape as sediments move across seafloors. McMenamin responded that the Nevada assemblage failed to match known hydraulic sorting patterns. The vertebral discs remained grouped in remarkably tight, repeated arrangements rather than spreading gradually across the deposit the way current-driven sorting normally produces. Another explanation suggested scavenger activity after death. Perhaps large marine animals disturbed carcasses and redistributed skeletal material across the site over time, yet this also struggled against the evidence. No identified scavenger from the Triassic produced the selective concentration of particular bone types observed there, and the fossils lacked the bite marks expected from repeated vertebrate feeding behavior. Random post-mortem drift formed another possibility. Bones may simply have accumulated accidentally through geological chance. Statistical analysis complicated that idea as well. The repeated spacing patterns and bone type clustering exceeded what random distribution models predicted by several standard deviations. The debate never fully closed. As of the most recent published discussions, the giant cephalopod interpretation remains unconfirmed, but importantly, it also remains unrefuted. No competing explanation has achieved broad consensus, and no newly discovered evidence has eliminated the behavioral hypothesis. Meanwhile, other researchers continued strengthening separate parts of the larger picture. Dirk Fuchs, working at the Free University of Berlin, helped establish the confirmed fossil record of ancient octopuses through exquisitely preserved Lebanese specimens. Isabel Kruta used micro-CT imaging on ammonite fossils to reveal bore holes matching octopus-style predation patterns hidden within shell structures. The evidence never arrived as a single revelation. It accumulated slowly, piece beside piece, around an idea many researchers initially resisted. Science rarely resolves questions like this in a single moment. It circles them, sometimes for generations. The Nevada site has now been circled for 14 years. No one has explained it away. Long before the Nevada hypothesis appeared, the ocean had already preserved a quieter clue. In the limestone deposits of Hakel and Hula, villages in modern Lebanon, layers of late Cretaceous seafloor settled into still water approximately 95 million years ago. The bottom of that ancient basin contained almost no oxygen. Scavengers could not survive there in large numbers, and bacterial decay slowed to an unusual crawl. Animals drifting into those depths did not vanish immediately into decomposition. Some remained intact long enough for sediment to wrap around them gently, preserving details soft tissue almost never allows geology to keep. From those deposits came two extraordinary animals, Chaopia levante and Chaopia hyperbolaris, confirmed octopus species from the Cretaceous world. They do not resemble primitive experiments or half-formed ancestors. Their bodies are unmistakably recognizable. 8 arms extend outward from compact mantles. Suckers line the limbs in ordered rows. Ink sacs remain visible inside the body cavity. Musculature appears as faint, dark tracings across the stone, preserving the outline of an animal that should have dissolved entirely before fossilization ever began. The ink itself survived. Researchers studying these specimens discovered that the pigment remained chemically active after 95 million years. Small amounts were dissolved and used for drawing, meaning the black fluid carried inside a living Cretaceous octopus still functioned in the modern world after an interval longer than the existence of most mammal groups. These fossils quietly solved an important problem. They confirmed that the modern octopus body plan already existed during the Cretaceous period. The hypothetical predator associated with the Nevada midden would not have looked alien in its essential anatomy. It would have possessed the same soft mantle, the same flexible arms, the same beak hidden beneath the center of the body. A modern diver encountering it in motion would immediately recognize what lineage they were seeing, even if the scale exceeded anything alive now. Yet the Lebanese fossils also illuminate the deeper paradox surrounding octopus history. The conditions required to preserve soft tissue are almost impossibly specific. Burial must occur rapidly enough to block scavengers. Oxygen levels must remain low enough to suppress bacterial destruction. Sediment chemistry must stabilize delicate structures before they collapse into featureless carbon stains. These conditions are geologically rare and unevenly distributed across time. The implication stretches quietly outward. If 2 small regions of ancient seafloor preserved recognizable octopuses in remarkable detail, then countless others likely lived and died in ordinary marine environments that erased them completely. Entire populations may have vanished without leaving a single visible trace in the fossil record. Modern technology has begun reopening these fossils in ways earlier researchers could not attempt. Micro-CT scanning now allows paleontologists to examine structures hidden inside stone without physically cutting the specimens apart. Chromatophore cell boundaries, sucker microstructures, and faint nerve pathways can be reconstructed three-dimensionally, from density differences invisible to the naked eye. The stone continues giving up information long after excavation. Somewhere inside a museum drawer, wrapped in paper and labeled decades ago, under the wrong classification, another specimen may already exist. A flattened stain, a fragment of mantle, a shape dismissed as unimportant because no one expected an octopus to be there. The fossil confirming the Nevada predator specifically may not be waiting underground. It may already have been found and simply not recognized yet. A reef fish and an octopus separated hundreds of millions of years ago, long before forests covered continents or flowers existed. One lineage eventually produced mammals, primates, and human beings. The other disappeared into the soft, dark architecture of the sea, building intelligence along a path so different that, for a long time, biology struggled to recognize it as the same phenomenon at all. Complex intelligence did not evolve once on Earth. It appeared independently at least 3 times. Vertebrates built it through the long inheritance of the fish brain, modified gradually across reptiles, mammals, and eventually humans. Birds reached it separately, especially among corvids and parrots, whose problem-solving rivals many primates, despite descending from dinosaurs rather than mammals. Cephalopods arrived there alone again, beginning from an ancestor closer to a clam than to any animal with a spine. No common intelligent ancestor connects these groups. No ancient blueprint existed waiting to unfold. Each lineage assembled cognition independently, using different biological materials and different nervous system designs. The vertebrate brain carries its history visibly inside itself. Deep structures, inherited from early fish, remain buried beneath newer layers. Reflexive systems occupy the lower architecture, while abstract reasoning expanded upward through enlarged cortical tissue. It is a centralized hierarchy, information moving through nested regions toward decision-making centers concentrated near the top. Birds solved the same problem differently. Crows and ravens possess no cortex resembling that of mammals. Their intelligence emerges from a dense region called the pallium, packed with neurons arranged in an entirely different geometry. The structures do not resemble mammalian brains anatomically, yet the behavioral results converge with startling precision. Tool construction, memory, planning, and causal reasoning appear there anyway, assembled through another route entirely. Then there is the octopus. No cortex, no pallium, no layered central command system. Its nervous system spreads outward into the body itself, distributed through the arms like a network, rather than stacked like a hierarchy. Two-thirds of its neurons never reach the central brain at all. Decision-making occurs partly at the edges, inside limbs capable of independent sensory processing and coordinated action without direct supervision. 3 radically different architectures, 3 separate evolutionary histories, yet each produced animals capable of flexible learning, environmental modeling, and novel problem solving. The implication settles slowly. Intelligence is not tied to a single anatomical design. It does not require hands, social tribes, mammalian brains, or upright posture. It appears whenever nervous systems cross a threshold of complexity that allows prediction, memory, adaptation, and behavioral flexibility to interact recursively with the environment around them. Earth discovered multiple ways to think. The Cretaceous octopus existed approximately 200 million years before the primate lineage capable of producing humans emerged. While small nocturnal mammals moved cautiously beneath ferns and cycads, trying to avoid the reptiles dominating the continents, something else was already solving problems beneath warm coastal water. It was hunting through camouflage, learning through distributed sensation, and interacting with its environment using a mind built from an entirely separate evolutionary experiment. Its thoughts would not have resembled ours, but they were still thoughts. We often imagine intelligence as a ladder leading upward toward human beings, as though evolution spent hundreds of millions of years moving in a single direction. The octopus reveals something quieter and far stranger. Mind was never heading toward one destination. It was branching outward the entire time. The water did not disappear all at once. For millions of years, the western interior seaway slowly withdrew from the center of North America, as though the continent itself had begun inhaling. Tectonic pressure lifted the growing Rocky Mountains along the western margin, tilting the basin and redirecting rivers toward newly rising ground. Shorelines crept backward, century after century. Warm coastal shallows became marshes, then floodplains, then dry sediment under open sky. By approximately 70 million years ago, the retreat was already unmistakable from the western edge. The great inland sea that once stretched from the Arctic to the Gulf of Mexico no longer occupied the continent completely. Its boundaries fractured into isolated marine corridors and shrinking basins. Then, by approximately 63 million years ago, the seaway was gone entirely. The ocean floor became land. What is now Kansas once rested beneath hundreds of meters of seawater filled with ammonites, fish, squid, and marine reptiles drifting through warm currents under subtropical skies. South Dakota, Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming, all of them carried the same hidden geography. Beneath farms, highways, and grasslands lies compressed marine sediment layered from tens of millions of years of ancient ocean life, settling slowly downward through water that no longer exists. The limestone itself remembers. Much of the pale stone spread across the Great Plains is biological in origin, assembled from microscopic shells, plankton, skeletons, and dissolved calcium structures accumulated grain by grain across immense spans of time. Every slab cut from those formations is the residue of vanished organisms. Buildings, roads, and fences across the American interior quietly contain the remains of an extinct sea. Fossil hunters still uncover its inhabitants from dry terrain far from any coastline. Mosasaur teeth emerge from ranchland. Plesiosaur vertebrae weather from hillsides. Thin fish scales appear in split layers of chalk beneath open prairie. The continent continues releasing pieces of the ocean through erosion, as though the landscape itself has not fully finished transforming yet. The Nevada mountainside, where the ichthyosaur midden was discovered, underwent the same impossible transition. 95 million years ago, it formed part of a shallow coastal margin where reef structures met deeper water. Currents moved across submerged rock faces alive with mollusks, fish, and drifting cephalopods. Now, the same location stands, exposed at altitude, in desert air, dry wind moving across stone that once rested beneath warm seawater. The reef wall where the octopus den may have existed still remains physically present. It simply no longer touches the sea. Hikers pass beneath those cliffs carrying water bottles and backpacks, moving across terrain that once contained ambush predators hidden inside reef crevices. The rock face appears ordinary now, sunlit and silent, giving little indication that it may once have overlooked a marine hunting ground populated by animals no human being would recognize as familiar. 95 million years is difficult for the human mind to hold steadily. It is more than distance backward in time. It represents an Earth arranged differently at nearly every level. Continents shifted into unfamiliar positions. Oceans circulating through altered chemistry. Atmospheres carrying different proportions of gas beneath different climates and starscapes. Yet one thing endured. A pattern of bones remained embedded in stone on a Nevada mountainside, surviving the disappearance of the sea itself. Some things last longer than the worlds that made them. Nothing in the warm Cretaceous water understood history. The giant octopus moving through those reefs carried within its body the accumulated result of approximately 200 million years of evolutionary refinement. Yet, it possessed no awareness of that inheritance. Every adaptation, every distributed nerve network, every chromatophore pulse and predatory instinct existed without narrative. The animal did not know it belonged to an ancient lineage, older than the dinosaurs surrounding it. It did not know entire oceans had risen and vanished before its species ever appeared. It simply moved through water that felt normal to it. The asteroid came the same way. When the sky changed 66 million years ago, the surviving octopuses did not interpret the event as catastrophe. They had no concept of extinction, boundaries, or planetary eras. They did not understand that ammonites were disappearing forever, or that marine reptiles would never return to the oceans again. The individuals that survived the collapse of the Cretaceous world experienced none of the historical meaning attached to that moment now. Some animals died, some remained alive. That was the entire reality available to them. The giant predator resting in its den along the reef wall never reflected on its own intelligence either. It did not pause to consider the strangeness of its nervous system or the sophistication of its behavior. It hunted when hungry. It rearranged objects around its den because something in its cognition compelled organization. It learned from contact with the environment because its neurons altered themselves through experience. Then it reproduced and died, leaving offspring that began the same process again without instruction or inherited memory. Each generation started from silence. Human consciousness occupies a different condition entirely. As far as current science can determine, human beings are the only organisms capable of locating themselves explicitly inside geological time. We understand that the continents beneath us were once arranged differently. We know species disappear permanently. We recognize that our civilization occupies only a brief interval within planetary history, and that eventually another interval will replace it. We are aware of endings before they arrive. The octopus possessed genuine complexity without carrying that burden. Its problem solving was real. Its individuality was measurable. Its behavioral flexibility emerged from authentic cognition, not mechanical reflex. Yet none of this required reflective awareness of the self performing those actions. There is no hidden lesson waiting beneath this distinction. The universe does not appear organized around moral symmetry. It simply permits minds to exist at different depths of self-recognition. Some organisms experience the world directly, moment by moment, without abstraction layered over perception. Others develop the capacity to observe themselves existing inside time. The Cretaceous octopus lived approximately 5 years beneath warm coastal water, entirely contained within the immediacy of sensation and action. It was never haunted by its past or preoccupied with its future. It did not wonder whether it mattered. It did not imagine its own disappearance. When it rested inside the darkness of its den, it was fully there. When it hunted, it was fully there. When it died, it did not know death as an idea. Human beings spend enormous portions of their lives trying to reach that same uninterrupted presence, attempting through meditation, ritual, exhaustion, or concentration to quiet the constant awareness of time passing around them. This animal never had to try. It had no other way to exist. In modern neuroscience, few questions remain as difficult as the one that cannot be placed under a microscope. Brains can be mapped. Electrical activity can be recorded. Networks of neurons can be traced through living tissue in astonishing detail. Yet, none of those measurements explain why processing information feels like anything from the inside. A machine may respond to light, sound, pressure, or temperature without possessing any inner sensation at all. Consciousness begins at the point where reaction becomes experience. Philosophers refer to this as the hard problem of consciousness. The problem is not whether organisms think or respond. It is why awareness appears to accompany those processes, why there is something it feels like to exist as a living system moving through the world. The octopus entered this discussion because its nervous system challenges nearly every assumption scientists once held about how awareness should arise. Its intelligence did not evolve from the vertebrate blueprint. It possesses no cortex, no mammalian forebrain, no layered hierarchy inherited from ancient fish ancestors. Much of its processing occurs outside the central brain entirely. Roughly two-thirds of its neurons are distributed through the arms themselves, where local decisions can occur before signals ever reach the head. And still, the animal solves problems, remembers solutions, adapts to novelty, and behaves with remarkable flexibility. That contradiction forced researchers to widen the question. In 2012, prominent neuroscientists gathered at Cambridge University and issued what became known as the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness. The statement concluded that non-human animals possess the neurological substrates associated with conscious states. Octopuses were specifically included. Stephen Hawking attended the event as a witness, underscoring the significance the declaration carried within the scientific world. This is not considered a fringe interpretation among specialists studying consciousness today. The debate has largely shifted away from whether octopuses possess some form of subjective experience and toward the much stranger issue of what that experience might actually be like. No one knows. An octopus nervous system may not generate a single centralized awareness in the way humans intuitively imagine consciousness. Sensation may emerge in partially parallel streams across the body. Each arm explores independently, tasting and touching at the same time, feeding enormous amounts of information into a distributed network unlike any vertebrate architecture. Even camouflage complicates the picture further. The skin changes color and texture almost instantly through direct neural control. Researchers still cannot fully determine whether the animal internally experiences those transformations as visual states, bodily sensations, or something with no human equivalent at all. Then there is sleep. When octopuses enter active sleep phases, their skin pulses through coordinated waves of shifting patterns. If these cycles represent memory consolidation, as many researchers now suspect, then experiences are being internally revisited after the external event has ended. Something persists through time strongly enough to be replayed. 95 million years ago, the giant cephalopod associated with the Nevada reef may have experienced warm current moving across its skin, the mineral texture of stone inside its den, the chemical trace of prey entering nearby water. Or perhaps its inner world resembled nothing humans could recognize. We cannot know. Yet the question itself matters. An animal separated from us by hundreds of millions of years of evolution still appears close enough to consciousness that science must seriously ask what existence felt like from behind its eyes. A lineage does not survive for 296 million years by accident. Across that span of time, the planet repeatedly became unfamiliar to itself. Continents merged into supercontinents and later tore apart again with the slow violence of plate tectonics. Inland seas appeared where deserts now stand. Forests spread across polar regions that today remain locked beneath ice. Entire atmospheric systems shifted composition as volcanic eruptions, evolving plants, and changing oceans altered the chemistry of the air. The magnetic poles reversed hundreds of times during those ages, Mountain ranges rose upward over tens of millions of years, stood beneath rain and wind until their peaks softened, then collapsed grain by grain into plains. 5 mass extinctions passed through the biosphere like enormous weather systems, erasing dominant forms of life so completely that future ecosystems grew over them, like forests reclaiming abandoned stone. And through all of it, the octopus lineage remained, not unchanged in every detail. Species appeared and disappeared. Bodies adapted to colder water, deeper trenches, coral labyrinths, volcanic coastlines, yet the essential architecture endured. The flexible body without bone, the distributed nervous system, the camouflage, the beak, the patient predatory intelligence concealed beneath shifting skin. When humans describe something as ancient, the scale is usually very small. We think of the Roman Empire as distant history. The Egyptian pyramids seem impossibly remote, standing at the edge of imagination itself. Even the oldest surviving human cities feel heavy with time, layered with generations whose names dissolved long ago. Yet against geological duration, those histories are almost invisible. The octopus lineage was already approximately 230 million years old when Rome collapsed. Human civilization, in its earliest recognizable agricultural form, extends back roughly 6,000 years. Writing, architecture, governments, astronomy, religion, recorded memory, all emerged within that narrow interval. Compared to the confirmed age of the octopus lineage, humanity has existed for approximately 0.002% of the time. And still, tonight, it is the human mind turning toward the animal in wonder. Somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, an octopus presses itself against volcanic stone while currents move quietly through kelp forests overhead. Its skin matches the surface beneath it so completely that passing fish register no boundary between animal and environment. The creature waits with the same patience its ancestors possessed in vanished oceans before the Rocky Mountains existed. It is not contemplating deep time. It does not know continents drift. It does not know species vanish. It has no awareness that its lineage crossed extinction, boundaries that erased entire dynasties of marine reptiles from the earth. It has no concept of millions of years, no sense of evolutionary inheritance, no understanding that another intelligent species now studies its behavior beneath laboratory lights. It remains entirely within the present moment, as the giant cephalopod beside the Nevada reef once remained within its own. There is something difficult to fully absorb about that continuity, a living thread extending backward beyond human emotional scale, unbroken through planetary transformation after planetary transformation, carried forward by animals that never knew what they were carrying. And perhaps that is the deepest weight of deep time. Not merely that something ancient survived, but that it survived without ever needing to understand that it had. Much of this story remains buried. The Nevada site that reshaped the discussion around ancient cephalopod predation has only been partially excavated. What currently lies exposed on the mountainside represents a narrow window through layers of rock that continue inward beyond the visible surface. Additional ichthyosaur remains may still exist deeper in the formation. Further bone arrangements may wait in unbroken stone. The structure interpreted as the den entrance itself may remain sealed behind sediment that has not yet been removed. For now, the site exists as an unfinished sentence. The predator associated with it remains equally unresolved. No formal species description has ever been published because no confirmed body fossil has been linked directly to the Nevada assemblage. The animal has no scientific name, no genus, no accepted anatomical reconstruction. Paleontology usually begins with bone and works outward toward behavior. In this case, the process has unfolded in reverse. The behavior appeared first, while the body itself remained absent. Even the size estimates remain provisional. The proposed arm span of 9 to 12 meters is based entirely on ecological inference, prey scaling, midden dimensions, and comparisons with modern cephalopod behavior. Without preserved tissue or skeletal structures, the upper limit of Cretaceous octopus size cannot be measured directly. It may eventually prove smaller than current estimates suggest. It may also prove larger. At present, the true maximum size of the lineage is unknown. Its geographic distribution is equally uncertain. Nevada provides one location along the margin of the ancient Western Interior Seaway, but the Cretaceous world contained enormous interconnected oceans extending across much of the planet. Similar predatory behavior may have occurred within the Tethys Sea, along the Proto-Atlantic coastlines, or throughout southern hemisphere marine ecosystems that remain comparatively underexplored. No evidence has yet confirmed or excluded that possibility. Its lifespan also remains unresolved. Modern octopuses generally follow semmelporous reproductive cycles, reproducing once before programmed death. Yet, larger cephalopods today often exhibit somewhat extended lifespans relative to smaller relatives. Whether the giant Cretaceous form compressed its growth into a brief existence or persisted longer in maturity cannot currently be determined. The same uncertainty surrounds its social behavior. The traditional assumption of strict octopus solitude has already weakened in recent years through observations at sites like Octopus, where multiple individuals maintain neighboring dens and interact repeatedly within shared territory. Whether the Nevada predator lived entirely alone or tolerated some degree of proximity with others from its species remains unknown. There are questions science already knows can never be answered directly. No Cretaceous octopus DNA will ever be recovered. Genetic material degrades continuously after death, and current biochemical models place the outer survival boundary for usable ancient DNA at roughly 1 million years under exceptional conditions. 95 million years lies far beyond that limit. The molecular history of the lineage must therefore be reconstructed indirectly by comparing living species and tracing evolutionary relationships backward through time. Yet even here, uncertainty leaves a narrow opening. Proteins can sometimes persist longer than DNA under rare preservation conditions. Amino acid fragments have already been recovered from organisms far older than scientists once believed possible. The Lebanon octopus fossils preserve extraordinary soft tissue detail. Future proteomic technologies, more sensitive than anything currently available, may someday extract molecular traces still hidden inside those fossils. Science does not move toward certainty in a straight line. It moves by refining questions until the questions themselves become sharp enough to uncover realities no one previously imagined to search for. Tonight, beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean, an octopus settles itself into stone. The water above it may be less than 50 meters deep. Kelp moves slowly with the current overhead, while moonlight breaks into fragments across the surface far above. Along the seafloor, the animal lowers itself against volcanic rock and disappears. The chromatophores shift. Texture changes ripple across the skin. What remains visible no longer appears alive at all. The strategy is ancient. 95 million years ago, another octopus waited in much the same way, along the margin of a vanished sea, hidden against reef stone, while large animals crossed warm coastal water nearby. The scale was different. The surrounding world was different, but the logic of the hunt remains recognizably the same even now. Elsewhere, far below sunlight, another lineage drifts through conditions almost impossible for humans to imagine directly. More than 1,000 meters beneath the surface, Grimpatothus octopuses move through total darkness where pressure crushes unprotected machinery and temperatures hover only slightly above freezing. No reef exists there. No sunlight reaches those depths. Yet the body plan persists effortlessly, adapting itself to an environment that would kill most surface organisms within seconds. In the Indo-Pacific region, a veined octopus crosses open sediment, carrying half a coconut shell beneath its body. It pauses, adjusts its grip, and continues forward with deliberate control, transporting shelter that will be assembled later when protection becomes necessary. Nearby, in a Mediterranean tide pool, another octopus studies the shape of a familiar human face leaning over the water, distinguishing one researcher from another with documented accuracy. In Seattle, an octopus recently slipped through the edge of an aquarium enclosure during the night, crossed the facility floor, entered a neighboring tank to feed, and returned to its own enclosure before morning staff arrived. The behavior was not random. The route was learned. The problem was solved. The ocean around them is warming. Across multiple regions of the world, octopus populations are expanding into areas that were previously too cold or ecologically unsuitable. Marine biologists tracking these shifts have documented growing distributions in changing coastal systems. The modern ocean is not becoming identical to the Cretaceous ocean, yet, in temperature and chemistry, some regions are moving toward conditions their lineage inhabited long before mammals dominated the land. They have crossed warming oceans before. The giant Cretaceous predator itself is gone. The reef systems that sustained it disappeared tens of millions of years ago. The ammonites vanished. The inland seas retreated. The enormous prey animals that once moved through those waters survive only as fossils weathering slowly from rock. But the lineage continued uninterrupted. From the early octopus forms of the Permian world to the animals alive tonight, the thread was never severed. It bent through extinction, climate change, drifting continents, and collapsing ecosystems without ever fully breaking. The Nevada midden still rests against desert stone. The bones remain arranged in patterns that natural processes still struggle to explain. The cliff face that may once have concealed a den continues standing beneath open sky where hikers now pass through dry mountain air. And somewhere tonight, in dark water moving quietly against rock, an octopus waits without movement, hidden so completely that the world around it no longer notices it is there at all. Nothing in the ocean was keeping a record. The giant octopus that moved through the Cretaceous seaway did not imagine a future world studying traces of its existence beneath laboratory lights. It possessed no sense of historical importance. It did not know it belonged to an ancient lineage already old beyond comprehension. It did not understand that the arrangement of bones outside a reef den might someday force paleontologists to reconsider an entire ecosystem. It hunted because hunting was what its body required. It built its den because the surrounding water contained predators, prey, current, darkness, and shelter. It reproduced once, then it died. What remained afterward was almost nothing. A pattern in stone, a handful of behaviors carried forward through descendants, a continuity of nervous systems solving problems beneath changing oceans for nearly 300 million years without interruption. No monument marked the passage of that lineage across geological time. No deliberate inheritance survived between generations. Each animal emerged alone into the world and learned existence from the beginning again. And still the line continued. There is a form of existence that does not depend upon being witnessed. Forests grew across continents before eyes evolved capable of seeing them. Entire ecosystems rose and vanished without memory, fully real despite leaving behind only compressed chemistry inside rock layers. The octopus belonged to that older category of life, complete within itself, requiring no observer to validate its presence. For 5 years, perhaps slightly longer, the giant cephalopod inhabited its ocean completely. Its attention rested entirely within immediate reality, within the reef wall against its skin, the movement of prey through current, the narrow entrance of the den, the changing chemistry of the water around it. No part of its mind drifted toward distant futures or imagined histories. It existed with total concentration inside the precise moment it occupied. Then the asteroid came. The warm coastal ecosystems disappeared. Inland seas retreated from continents. Reef systems collapsed. The shadows of marine reptiles vanished from the water forever. Everything familiar to that ancient predator dissolved into extinction. Sediment, uplift, erosion, desert. The reef wall became stone exposed beneath dry Nevada air. The ocean floor became mountain. The bones became fossils. And the lineage moved forward anyway. Tonight, somewhere beneath black Pacific water, an octopus settles itself silently against rock while current passes overhead. It waits with the same patient stillness carried through hundreds of millions of years of uninterrupted predatory life. The animal does not know the age of the instincts guiding it. It does not know that continents have shifted around its ancestors like drifting weather systems across deep time. It only knows the immediate world touching its body now. The ocean remains dark in many places humans will never fully explore. Vast regions still lie beyond direct observation, filled with pressure, silence, cold, movement, and concealed lives unfolding without witness. Among them are animals, flattening themselves against stone surfaces, becoming indistinguishable from the environment surrounding them, waiting for the small disturbance that signals prey drifting within reach. Some version of that waiting began before the first dinosaurs walked on land. It continued through extinction. It continued through the reshaping of the earth itself. And tonight, beneath moving water and planetary darkness, it is still continuing.